Now I'd like to talk a little bit about the moon, which is I've been fascinated with more than usual for the past 6 or 7 years. And I'm going to give you a few facts here at the beginning. So a few other facts here is the moon's gravity is not 1/6 that of Earth. It's 68%. It has a breathable atmosphere equal to about 18,000 feet here on Earth. In other words, if you would climb an 18,000 foot mountain, where you breathe there, that's the air that's on the breathable air on the moon. They also have domed cities there that have a little bit more air pressure. The other thing is, let me look here at my notes, the population of the moon is about 500 million, and they're people just like us, but they're not from Earth. They're from someplace else. The moon was constructed on Jupiter, or inside Jupiter, 38 billion years ago, and it's been all around the different solar systems doing what it does best. And it has a hundreds of thousands of aliens, the little grays, living inside, and they do their abduction work from the moon. The last time the moon showed up here on Earth was about 15,000 years ago, and that's where they've been doing their abductions from. Some people say that 1 in 10 are abducted. Actually, it's every single person that is human gets abducted from the time they are born, once at 2 years old, once at 4, once at 6, once at 8, and once at 13 years old. And they're basically to see that everything is going okay, that they're growing up okay, that they all have all the latest modifications and everything is going right. So there's so many saucers up in the air now. If you could, during the daytime or during the nighttime, if you could have a switch and turn it on and make every saucer that was in the sky at any single moment turn on bright, the sky would be full. I mean, there wouldn't be any sky. It would just be total saucers. There's so many going on at all the times. The other thing is, let me see here, my notes here. I'm having a little trouble here. On the moon, there's cities, villages, lakes, rivers, mountains, just everything you can imagine. And their malls are much, much better than ours. If you went to the moon in the malls, you'd be really surprised because they're about 10 times better than we are, better than our malls. Now, the other things I'd like to mention and how I got there is Newton's universal law of gravity is wrong. His law of gravity, he believed that the density and size of an object was directly proportional to its gravitational pull, gravitational force, and it's not, has nothing to do with it. So after he passed away, somebody else gave a equation for what they thought was the gravity pull, and that was G equals M1 times M2 over R squared. That's totally wrong. And because Einstein based his theories, both general and special, on Newton's universal law of gravity, everything that Einstein came up with is wrong. Everything is his theories, both special and general, are wrong. There's not a shred of truth in any of it, which includes the speed of light. The speed of light is not limited. It's forever. So anyway, how did I get into all this? So a few years ago, I watched a video that Richard Hoagland put out called the Moon-Mars Connection. I think it was part 2. And he showed a photo taken by the Lunar Orbiter series. I forget what the number of the photo was, but it was a oblique photo of the Sinus Medii. The Sinus Medii is right dead center of the moon, the near side that we can see. And there's a tower there, and the tower stands 6 miles high, and on top of it, there's a square, and the square is 1 mile on each side. It's huge. It's an enormous construction. That was what interested me most on his video. So I got to looking into it, and almost at the same time, I was reading a book by a remote viewer, McMonigal, and who was one of the Army remote viewers. And he was tasked one day to follow a soul from a person who had been in a traffic accident south of San Francisco. And he relates in his book, his first book, I forget what the name of it is, following this soul. And as he followed it, he's a remote viewer, as they got out of the Earth's atmosphere, it was going directly towards the moon. And so he followed it, and as he followed it, it appeared like it was getting wrapped with something. And the closer he would get to the moon, the louder this message got. And the message was, do not come any closer. This is not your place. You may not come here. And he kept on following it until the message got so loud that he was actually afraid for his life, and he broke off. But that got to me thinking there, if that soul was going directly towards the moon, maybe it was headed directly for that tower. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not, but that's what started me thinking on all that. In 1993, a lady named Perry Spolter wrote a book called The Gravitational Force of the Sun. If you haven't seen the book, or if you haven't read it, you really should, because when everybody sees this book and understands what it does, you realize that everything we've been taught about gravity, the density, everything is wrong. And she proves this mathematically, that Newton was wrong, and that the correct formula for gravity is Kepler's third law. And so, realizing this, I started looking into all the things that could possibly be. And we figured out, I had Perry help me because she's really strong in mathematics, the gravity of the moon. And since it isn't based on size or density, we used the Boole-Aldous law of inverse square. And using the neutral point of 243,500 miles, it turns out the gravity of the moon is about 68% that of Earth. Now, let me make it clear that Perry Spolter does not believe that that's the true gravity of the moon. She says that was only one point, and she figured it as a three-body problem using the sun. And she said it was only one point, and it was for July 20th, 1969, which was the exact time of the alleged Apollo 11 landing on the moon. If that was true, that they would have been landing in 68% worth of gravity, which is not possible because they didn't have enough fuel. All you have to do is take a model of the shuttle and a model of the alleged Saturn V, put them together, and knowing that the shuttle only goes up about 300 miles, and then looking at alleged Saturn V-B, has, just a little bit taller. They tell us that went to the moon. Obviously, there's not enough fuel to do that, especially with the gravitational force of 68%. As far as the Saturn V, that was not a Saturn V. They never got the Saturn V working properly. And so they used a Saturn IV-B, and they dressed it up cosmetically as a Saturn V. So anyway, those are my thoughts on the moon. Talk a little bit about 9/11. I wrote an affidavit in support of Morgan Reynolds' quit-am complaint. Quit-am complaint is a complaint to the New York District Court when the district attorney or whoever is involved refuses to make any charges. You, as a civilian, can file a quit-am complaint, put in all the things that you believe were true and they can evaluate it. The court dismissed both Morgan Reynolds' quit am complaint and my affidavit. My affidavit was 15 pages long. You can look at it in just Google John Lear's affidavit and it'll come up. It's taken mostly from the Aerodynamics for Naval Aviators, and it proves conclusively that no airplane, no 767 could fly at 561 miles an hour, which is about 490 knots, could not fly that at sea level. They can fly that at altitude, but where the air is 3 times as dense at altitude at sea level, there's no way it could do it. The other thing I pointed out is to have an airplane pilot who has just flown a 150 or small airplane like that crawl into the cockpit of a 767 and confronted with the EFIS, which is the new navigation instrumentation for the 767. And it's a new way of presenting the information of your altitude and attitude and all the rest of it. For him to be able to figure out what that meant and then fly 90 miles south and then get turned around and hit a 208-foot wide building dead center, it's impossible. Didn't happen. Also, they never found one single part of either airplane that allegedly crashed into World Trade Center 1 and 2. As you know, all parts in a airplane must be certificated and marked, either emblazoned or painted or somehow put on that part what its authorization number was. There's 7.5 million parts between the two airplanes, and they didn't find one, not one single part. So as far as the Pentagon airplane, that was an overfly. The one airplane, whoever's flying it, flew north of the Sitco station, and as it became a beam of the part of this Pentagon where it was supposed to hit, they set off explosives and made that hole. Of course, the hole wasn't big enough for an airplane to go through. And April Gallup, who was a Pentagon employee, was sitting 40 feet away from that hole. She had her 6-month-old son in his baby seat right below her desk. And when the explosion went off, there was a bunch of stuff that came down from the ceiling. But when it all stopped, she grabbed him, put him over her shoulder, and crawled out that hole that the bomb made. And she said she smelled no fuel, saw no airplane, saw no drone, saw no missiles, smelled no diesel, fuel, Jet A, Jet B, nothing like that. She went out on the lawn and to get triage, and she was approached by Navy or Army intelligence and has been harassed ever since to try and change her story that she saw an airplane, which she didn't, and she has stuck to her story. As far as the other airplane in Shanksville, there couldn't possibly have been an airplane crash there. There wasn't near enough wreckage. There was no wreckage there. It was supposed to crash at 11 o'clock, and it was supposed to crash, or the fake crash. They used holograms. Whatever they used to make the holograms apparently became inoperable, so that when it came time to hit Building 7, nothing happened. And so they already had it rigged to explode, and they didn't know what to do. So they quickly, within 6 hours, went down to Shanksville, found a place that looked like could be a wrecked airplane, put a couple of parts in there, and had some people stand around in hazmat suits. And they let the press in there at 5 o'clock. The press didn't see anything between 11 and 5 o'clock. And they were told about Shanksville, went down to Shanksville, and they were told that's where the airplane crashed. But of course, there was no airplane. And one of the things that happened, there's a unit in the airplane, ACARS unit, and it transmits certain information from the engines and the airframe to the airplane company to tell them how the flight's going. That was still transmitting 4 hours after the airplane supposedly crashed in Shanksville.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on what you believe the state of the art of holographic technology is?
Holographic engineering technology has been around for about 40 years. I had a friend who was in the television industry, and about 15 years ago, she was invited to a presentation. All they did was say the history and future of television. And there was a small auditorium, held about 100 people. And she went in there. It was brightly lit auditorium. The lights weren't down or anything. And there was a little stage there. And she goes and she sits down with about 80 people. There were, the high people of television and movie industry there. And so they sat down, and this guy comes out from behind the curtain and comes up the podium and says his name and starts talking about the history of television. And he talks about developing the cathode ray tube and all the stuff they had to go through. And as he's talking, he steps down off the stage and goes up one aisle and then comes down and then goes up the other aisle and comes down and then climbs back up on the stage and goes up in the podium. And it all took about 20 minutes. And my friend says, boy, it was boring as hell. And so he gets to the end and he says, who knows what holds the advance of television movies today? And when he said today, he disappeared. It was all hologram. And that was 15 years ago. And about 10 years ago, a friend of mine, Norman Bergram, who wrote the Ringmakers of Saturn, you'll know that he was very, very, worked for many of the high electronics and aviation companies, all of them. And he was very, very knowledgeable. And he wrote the Ringmakers of Saturn. He got a hold of some of the Voyager 1 and 2 pictures from Saturn. And in the rings, he found a spaceship that was 30,000 miles long and 2,400 miles in diameter. And he talks about how he found this, and he shows the pictures and enlarges and shows what he found. Anyway, I used to visit him every once in a while, and I visited him after 9/11, and I told him my theory of a hologram. He said, I have no doubt of that. And I said, why? He says, because once I was driving to work he lived in Los Altos Hills near San Francisco, and he was driving down to south of there where Lockheed is. And he said he was just driving along and he saw a shadow. He had a friend with him in the car, and they looked up, and here's a 747 just flying right along with them, of course, going much faster. And just for about 30 seconds, they watched it fly over and then disappeared. And he said, that was my introduction to hologram. And he said, so I know it exists. So it exists, and that's what people saw in Manhattan. Holograms they have light, sound, just every kind of thing that you would expect to see. There's nothing they project against, they just project it out of thin air.
Where are the passengers of Flight MH17?
Yeah, first of all, let me say that the crash of 370, when they shot it down, it was timed exactly for the time when the shooting started at Gaza, at the Gaza Strip. As to the passengers of MH17, this scenario, this shoot down, has been planned for a long, long time. And my theory is that that was all fake passengers. All the passengers you see crying for their loved ones and stuff is all fake. They're all actors. And so that airplane never took off. So there was nowhere place for all the passengers to go. They didn't exist.
So, I mean, there were genuine passengers who are not returning back to their loved ones it would appear on flight MH17 at least. The same questions came up with 9/11. There was the plane that supposedly crashed in Pennsylvania.
The fact is that it was MH370 that crashed in Ukraine. Whatever happened to MH17, I don't know. If somebody was lost, I have no explanation for that. But I do know that it was MH370 that crashed in Ukraine.
We're being invaded by aliens? Are we part of just a garden of life forms all doing their own thing?
Okay, first of all, you have to understand that the universe is infinite. The Earth is more than 13 billion years old. There was no Big Bang to start all this. It's been going on forever. We are the product of a certain set of aliens. There's hundreds of trillions of aliens out there, but we are the product of one set of aliens. The little grays, they're just robots or advanced robots that do the work for the aliens who engineered and manufactured us. We're here on Earth because we've all lived many lifetimes before, maybe 25 lifetimes, maybe 30 lifetimes, maybe more. But in a previous lifetime, each of us has made some mistake that we're sent down to Earth, which is only one of billions of prison planets where people who have made a mistake are sent down to. And we're here to learn how to live our lives with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, and to love our families each and every day. And that's a real love, not hiya, honey, as you're going out the door. That's what we have to learn while we're here on Earth. Now, when we die, some of you remember when Steve Jobs died, the last thing he said just before he passed away was, "Oh gosh, oh wow, oh wow." And what he was seeing was the reception area. And it's absolutely huge. And after you die, you go to the reception area. If you believe in God, God meets you. If you believe in Jesus, Jesus meets you. If you're a Buddhist, and Buddha meets you. If you're a Muslim, the great guy will meet you. In my case, I believe in the Great Pumpkin, so the Great Pumpkin's going to meet me. But whoever you believe in meets you, and you get to meet all the friends that you've made in previous lifetimes. And then after about a half an hour of that, you go into a little room and you're shown all the wonderful and good things you did in your life, all the loving things you did in your life. And then you're shown all the nasty things. And most people, without exception, can't believe that that was all recorded and available for viewing, that anybody could remember all of the little nasty things they did all their life. But in fact, they do. And after that, the decision is made, and I don't know exactly who makes the decision. You're either sent back down for more work on learning how to live with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, or you get to stay there in the fourth dimension. The fourth dimension is what people here on Earth call heaven. But if you take what you believe to be heaven and then multiply it by 1,000, that's how great it is. And if you make the grade on living your life with integrity and without envy, hate, or greed, that's where you get to stay, and you'll stay there a couple of lifetimes, and then you go on up. And people ask, well, on up what dimension? There's no end to the dimensions. There's the fifth, sixth, and they go on forever. And your life goes on forever. That's why we have to learn how to navigate our soul. And that's why we're here on Earth, is to straighten out the problems that we've had so far.
So anything you can show from what you've picked up on this whole hierarchy of who's in control? Is it a nation? Is it a faction? A secret society?
No, it's not a secret society. Nobody runs anything except the ETs. They do exactly what we tell them to do. The leaders of the countries, whenever they get to be leader, they have a conversation with ETs, and the ETs tell them how, what they're going to do and where they're going to go and how it's all going to work out. As far as disclosure, I hear a lot about it's just around the corner. I don't think it's going to be here for at least 100 years. There's no reason to. There's no reason for everybody to know what's going on. We have enough problems here. That would just create a lot of chaos.
Okay. Any thoughts on the ET hierarchy? Have you detected any particular species of extraterrestrial that may be more higher on the food chain than the others?
No, I don't know who they are. There's 12 types of ETs around the Earth, keeping charge of what's going on, and they're the ones that pretty much handle everything. There's a renegade part of the ETs who don't want to see us advance beyond the technology that we're at now. There's another set of ETs that do want us to advance, but they're in the minority right now, and that's why the governments who have all this really cool stuff that we don't know about keep that to themselves.
So you're saying that you believe that there's a fair degree of cooperation between the different alien species?
Say that again?
You believe that there's a fair degree of cooperation between the different
yeah.
visitors?
Absolutely, yeah.
We ran an article in Nexus on Russian cosmonauts and their experiences in space. Not only were they seeing unusual craft nearby, but they had very interesting, I guess you may call them psychic experiences, expanded awareness experiences. In your conversations with people in the US space program, have you encountered or have you picked up information to suggest that their astronauts have had personal experiences while out there that more than they're letting on?
No, but I can tell you the Apollo astronauts are absolutely positive that they went to the moon. Now, that's how far our mind control technology has gone to, where they absolutely believe it. There's no doubt in their minds that they went to the moon, but they didn't. We don't get a lot of what the Russians did. For instance, Yuri Gagarin is supposed to be the first man into space, and the highest he ever got was the top of the ladder to this capsule that he was supposed to have landed in, and they took a picture of him. That's the highest he ever got into space. Fukushima was set off by an atomic bomb 120 miles northeast of Fukushima underwater, and that created the tsunami that created the start of all the damage. The Israelis had just gotten control of all 52 of the Japanese reactors by bidding on controlling them. And what happened is they were able to, after the atomic bomb was set off, change all the safeguards, turn them all off so that the maximum damage would occur. And the reason they did that was because they supposedly caught Japan giving Iran high-grade nuclear material such as plutonium.
I'm still curious to know I've heard you in other talks. You've elaborated a lot more on the size of what some people call the secret space program. The idea that man is actually out there flying around in advanced craft with bases on other moons, etc., interacting on high-level projects. Some of the scenario described by Lou in his books. Are you able to comment or elaborate on that?
Well, I think his books are absolutely fascinating. As far as what the U.S. has done is they used the money for the fake Apollo and Gemini and Mercury programs to build a constellation of 24 orbiting weaponized satellites, plus 2 that were used for command and control. Now, the World Trade Center 1 and 2 were destroyed by these satellites. They're using molecular dissociation. And what they do is just take apart the makeup of concrete and steel. And that's what all that dust was floating around Manhattan. It was just the steel and concrete coming apart into particles 80 microns in diameter. And what happened is after everything was done and said, they wanted to build a new set of towers. And what they found out was this was the first time that this weapon of molecular dissociation had been used at apparently full power. Well, what happened is they found out that it was not self-quenching. And what that means is after they quit firing it, the effects didn't stop. So that when they started to build the buildings where the World Trade Center were, they would immediately rust, and they couldn't build there. So what they did is they made a reflecting pool in there that is the exact dimensions of World Trade Center 1 and 2, and that was, they said that was for, in memoriam of the people that were killed there. But the reason the reflecting pool is there is because they couldn't build anything there. And then they built the new buildings around that reflecting pool. One of the things that I found out in the past couple of years is that I used to drive between Las Vegas and Reno. Halfway between Las Vegas and Reno, there's a little town called Hawthorne, Nevada, and it has a little lake there. It's about 15 miles long, about 100 feet deep. And when you go into town, at the beginning of town, it says a big blue sign. It says Naval Undersea Warfare Center. And I always wondered, what could be Undersea Warfare Center? I mean, that lake is not going to hold any submarine. So what are they doing here? I finally found out about 3 years ago that what they have is in Monterey Bay, there's an entrance. If you go onto Google, you can see a canyon. And this canyon leads right up to the shoreline of Monterey Bay. And the Navy found out that they can take their nuclear subs and go under the 15 western states of the United States. That includes Nevada, California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, and so on. And those 15 western states are floating on a plate, and they can navigate under that. And what they did was, in Hawthorne, has traditionally, across the street from the Naval Undersea Warfare Center, is a place where they made all kinds of munitions for submarines. And instead of having to ship it on trucks north to San Francisco or south to San Diego, they just drive across the street, and there's a huge elevator, actually 2 elevators there, and they go down 3,400 feet. The elevation of Hawthorne is 3,400 feet. And these elevators go down to the Pacific Ocean. And they take these munitions and everything they've made there and take it down, load up the submarines. There's a submarine pin under 3,400 feet under Hawthorne, and they have about 15 to 20 submarines there at any time. And they go back and forth out this Monterey entrance, but they can go anywhere else under these 15 states. They can go to Lake Tahoe. They can go to Pyramid Lake. They can go to north in Idaho. There's a lake up there. They can go to the naval base at Trona. I'm trying to think of what that is. Anyway, they can go anywhere under those states in the submarine.
So these are water tunnels?
They're not channels. It's a continental plate that sits on the ocean there. The ocean covers the whole thing.
What is your view on the existence of robot humans and cyborgs amongst us?
My opinion on robots, demons, and cyborgs?
Not just demons and cyborgs, but artificial humans that are wandering around amongst mankind. Have you heard stories of this?
All I know about that is in 1980, a friend of mine, his right-hand man was a guy named Cecil McMains. And Cecil used to work up at the test site on the Blackbird program. He would be over in Saudi for, I think it was 8 weeks, and then he'd come back for 3 weeks. And he'd always come over to my house and tell me what was going on. And one of the things he told me, he said, one night we're sitting there at the bar, and he says, "John, what do you know about clones?" And I said, "Nothing." He said, "Well, it's all true." He said, "I wish you could be a mouse in my pocket to see what I've seen." So apparently they, in 1980, they had quite a big army of clones there. And I don't know why they were doing it in Saudi.
Okay, now the Philadelphia experiment.
All I know about that is Lou Baldwin, who has written some great books. And what Lou said is the Philadelphia experiment was real. It was successful, and it's been covered up ever since.
How does he know this information?
Lou showed up on above.secret.com in 2005. He started writing about being on a saucer, being in the military. And as I read through the first 19 pages of 120 pages, it struck me, after researching all this for maybe 30 years, this guy is believable. He knows what he's talking about. And so I kind of hooked up with him and defended him on some of the people that were attacking him. But we got to be very good friends, and he has some excellent information. I believe it all, except for the part where he says that he believes that Armstrong and Aldrin were allowed a peek on the moon. And other than that, I agree with all the rest of the stuff he talks about.
So those humans that Lou is meeting and interacting with on the spaceships and on the planetary bases, those are not humans from Earth, is that what you're saying?
Some of them are, but not all of them. When I am talking about us not going to the moon, that we may have gone in the past 20 years. I'm just saying that the technology in 1969 was not sufficient enough for us to go then.
Do you think there's any agenda to make aliens the next baddie in any of this? Do you pick up any chatter on that topic, or is it just internet gossip?
No, I used to hear a lot of that. I don't hear anymore. I think that would be causing a lot of problems for themselves to make a false flag like that. But who knows?
Well, can you reconcile how the International Space Station functions and works in relation to all this? Is it the case that it's not in the danger zone? And what else can you tell us?
Well, you'll remember that when the shuttle used to go up, it used to take them 3 days to get there. And we used to argue with one of NASA's morons, Jim Ober, and we would say, the Russians can get there in a couple hours. Why did it take us 3 days to get up there? And he would say, "Oh, well, you don't know anything about orbital mechanics and how difficult it is to line up with this and that and so on and so on." And then we say also, when the Russians come back from the ISS, it only takes them 2 hours. Why did it take us 2.5 days? Oh, well, first of all, our astronauts are so tired from all the stuff they had to do on the ISS that we had to give them 2 complete rest periods and this and that and so on. It was really baloney. What they were doing was, when the shuttle would go up, it was carrying an immense amount of material for the satellites that I told you about, the 24 weaponized satellites. And they were distributing that all the way when they were going up. When they get to the space station and they'd open the door, the hatch of the cargo door there, you could see that only half the space was used, and that was never explained. Why didn't they fill it up? The other thing is, every time the shuttle went, the Russians 2 days prior to that would send up a Soyuz. And we managed to get a hold of a manifest, cargo manifest, and the majority of it was fruit every time.
Which are you implying that there's manned space stations in orbit, or
We have 24 weaponized space stations, which have a number of crew members, maybe as much as 5, plus two stations command and control, which have a number of people in there. There's a lot of people up there, and I estimate that our astronaut corps is 1,000 or more at this time. We're using the Russians to go up as a cover for all the people we're sending up. We have at least 3 different types of rockets that are man capable, and they take off from Kwajalein Island. And there's traffic that goes up there all day long.
you talking NASA or just American?
But,
The traffic that's going
well, no,
from that island.
the Air Force. Okay, it should be pointed out that the U.S. is trying to make an enemy of Russia by claiming that Putin shot down MH17. But of course, it wasn't MH17, it was 370, and Russia didn't shoot it down. It was the Israelis who put it up there in the first place.
The Black Knight satellite. What have you heard or know about the Black Knight satellite? And maybe you could explain what you know of it generically for the people in the audience who've never heard of it.
The Black Knight satellite is a craft that was taken by pictures taken by STS-88, and it has the pictures of this thing, not in the same orbit, but they got good pictures of it. What it is this is a advanced U.S. spacecraft that uses the same technology that Space One that Burt Rutan designed uses, and that's I'm trying to think of what they call a pop top thermalization. And what it does is it's launched in a rocket. The rocket, when it gets into space, opens up, and this thing comes out. This thing can travel all around a different spacecraft, and when it's ready to come back to Earth, the tail comes up, and it can actually float down instead of re-entering at 18,000 miles an hour, and thereby defeating any restrictions that were in place regarding the amount of rockets that we can have. And so this was by accident that the STS got these pictures, and the people who were in charge of this secret program, they couldn't get to it fast enough to stop it from coming out. So what they did is they said it was a UFO and named it the Black Knight UFO, but it's obviously Earth-type technology. I have dozens of pictures of it, and there's no way that ETs would have a spacecraft like that. Just none.
Thank you very much for being part of our conference.